What's your
standing
name?
eating ice cream. I'm Kyle.
Where do you come from?
I'm from Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah.
So I'm not too far, but I mean, I wasn't doing too much else over the water anyway. I was homeless and unemployed. So I mean, here they've got an opportunity where I can do a job that has the same returns for me. It's not cash, obviously, but all I would spend my cash on would be clothing, a place to stay, and food. Now that all of these things are being provided for me, I can also take a lot more responsibility in my work because I know I'm not doing it for an arbitrary value system. I'm doing it for myself. I'm not doing it for a boss who's just trying to get the most of his money out of me. I'm doing it for my community, and that's a much more powerful feeling.
How would you describe your community?
I think in short it would be very difficult. It's a very, very diverse community. We have people of all sorts of ages, backgrounds, obviously genders and races, cultures. It's pretty good though. I like it quite a bit. It's a very inclusive community. I mean, it's almost like a family in many places. And,
Do you go to a lot of meetings? Do you have to go to a lot of meetings?
I try to go to whatever meetings are directly relevant to this, or if there's something being set up that I'm not necessarily in favor of, I'll go to those meetings to give my little bit of dissent and try to put my input. And I mean, they're a little more bureaucratic than I prefer, but what I do like is that they are inclusive enough for me to go to those meetings if there's something I don't like.
Like you feel you've had a voice?
Right. And that's very important.
And what are some of the issues? What are some of the most important issues that have come up for you that would make you go to a meeting?
Just things like how they were running. One of the things was the Spokes Council, which essentially was originally meant to be for information dissemination between working groups as far as budget and things like that are concerned. But it got a little more politically oriented and a little more about making changes across the camp, and I wanted to go to those meetings just to make sure that all of the working groups that are in this camp have a say, because there was a sense of, well, the working groups will have a say, but some groups are not working groups, some groups are thematic groups, and those groups wouldn't have a say. And with my political beliefs, I don't necessarily believe in that. I believe that although they may be very long-winded and redundant at times, full equality and full inclusion is much more important.
So what's the latest, what are you thinking about today that maybe you weren't thinking about a month ago in terms of all the issues that have been raised?
I'm not really sure. I can't really say that I'm thinking so much about the problems themselves. It's kind of how these problems have developed so we can understand the nature of these problems.
You do think about?
And yeah, that's given me a much more, even seeing the growth of capitalism itself come from a kind of society that wouldn't necessarily be vouching for that or incorporating that, it's been very interesting to see how a lot of people who get a sense of entitlement kind of would try to lead towards a system that would result in capitalism. And now that we have that information, now that we've seen that capitalism does not work, we can say, okay, well, now that we see what steps are progressing to capitalism, let's kind of change those and overcome on the social and psychological level the problems that lead to those kinds of social structures.
And what would you say the replacement system should be, ideally?
My personal opinion on it would probably differ from a lot of other people's personal opinions.
But what's yours?
Anarcho Syndicalism.
Anarcho?
Syndicalism.
What is syndicalism?
Anarcho Syndicalism is essentially a system where you have non-decision-making representatives of multiple working groups, very similar to what the Spokes Council proposal was originally meant to be before it got changed up, where you have non-decision-making representatives from different working groups or collectives, whatever you may call them, and those groups are able to kind of get together and make the decisions on an all-inclusive level for everybody, but everybody just in those working groups.
Why are they non-decision making?
They're non-decision making so as to kind of prevent false representation and to make sure that anybody's voice is everybody's voice. So if those elected officials were to be making those decisions, we'd have a political structure very similar to the one today, and that's very, very open to corruption, and it's just not non-hierarchical. There is a definite hierarchy there, and essentially what that would be is certain working groups would be saying, well, this representative can speak for me. Another thing to ensure that it stays decentralized and non-hierarchical is that those representatives have a high amount of rollover, which essentially means that it is not the same representative, hopefully, every meeting. It's a different person, and their only purpose is information dissemination. There are no decisions made within those meetings that would affect everything. It's simply communication and appropriation of resources among the different working groups, depending on who has what.
Have you been here from the beginning?
Yes, I have.
Do you write notes or keep a journal?
To an extent, yeah. It's been a little, I forget quite a few times, but somebody got me a little red book actually that I jot down notes in every so often, but I noticed I use it a lot more for names than anything else.
But the process is so organic and it's evolving. kind of moment by moment, and you're getting this experience that could shift things in different ways, right? I mean, in terms of like what works, what doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a learning experience. One of the things I would like to stress also is that one of the things people always say is, well, what demands do you have? What world do you want on the other side? And I think that really kind of negates the fluidity and adaptive ability that we have in our political structures. I feel like if you were to say that we knew everything, we wouldn't be able to say that we were wrong about anything. And that's one of the most important things, is if we are starting to get something wrong, we have the ability, and it is inclusive enough, that somebody can stand up and be like, listen, this isn't working, this is why it isn't working, and this is why
Has that happened in the meetings where people say this isn't working, what can we do to change it?
Yeah, there are things like blocks which are used, and essentially blocks are like the most extreme form of dissent that you can have in here. If you are blocking, that essentially means that you are willing to leave the camp itself and stop participating.
How many people have done that?
Very few people have left, but that is just simply because blocks are very well respected, and we are not trying to get any individual to leave this camp. And I mean, I'm sure there have been a couple who have left because of various decisions, but generally we make sure, I mean, a block also works as direct response in our system. So if somebody is blocking, they have an opportunity to get up on stack and say very immediately why it is they're blocking, what they feel is dissentiary about it, and what can be done to achieve full consensus.
So blocking would happen when there's a vote being taken?
Yeah, votes, temperature checks, or just if ideas are being presented, somebody can propose a block. And
a temperature check is metaphoric, like
a temperature check is just essentially like, hey, how is everybody feeling about this idea that's being proposed, without having quite a formal vote, just kind of getting like a feel for how the crowd is feeling at that time.
In a way, we didn't really anticipate that there could be such a groundswell of political action on the part of people in your generation, because it really seemed to be kind of like not such an activist-minded generation. So where do you think like the seeds of this were sown for people in your generation?
I mean, I feel like a lot of people do have very, very heavy activist education. I feel like people do have good political education in this country. I mean, we were raised by generations from the 60s and 70s, so I mean, we've all got it in our minds, and even though there is a lot of entertainment to be had, I think more than anything else, it's just the image that nobody wants to do anything. And that's offered, I mean, just by media in general, it's offered by commercials, advertisements, where there's so much entertainment out there that actually going out and doing something is discouraged. I know myself, I was actually very surprised that it got this big. I was very surprised that there were so many politically active individuals, because I mean, like I said, the image that the media gives is not necessarily a positive image. It does not necessarily reflect that so many people
But so you feel that the education you got from your parents and your community and also from school in a way prepared you for this?
I would say, I mean, I was raised through the New York City public school system, and I believe in absolutely no way did they prepare me for this whatsoever. I mean, in a lot of ways. And
where did you go to school?
I went to various public schools in Brooklyn. I went to, I mean, I don't want to say in advance, I don't want to put it against the teachers themselves. I've seen very pained looks in a lot of my teachers' faces, especially classes like history and stuff like that, when they have to teach about, say, Christopher Columbus and sit there and talk about how he found America. And you can just see it in their eyes that they're sitting there reading this stuff just like,
don't quite believe
it's their job. And I mean, they're really, very few of them are willing to jeopardize their careers in order to say, you know, Christopher Columbus was a genocidal maniac. Because, I mean, it is what the curriculum is, and the government definitely tries to teach us a few very specific viewpoints that they try to call patriotic, but I don't see in any way how dishonesty is patriotic. I don't see how lying to make your country look better is patriotic. I feel more than anything else, being able to expose our mistakes as well as our successes will help us grow.
Right. Thanks.